Well, it's that time of the week again. It's time for Chit Chat Across the Pond. This is episode number 825 for December 13th, 2025, and I'm your host, Allison Sheridan. Now, I said this was for December 13th, and while that's true, this interview was actually recorded 2 months ago on October 10th. I did not forget about it. I knew that the holidays were going to be rough for me to write and record, so I saved it. Without further ado, there are some people who are just simply part of the fabric of the NosillaCast, piping up from time to time over many years to provide valuable insight to the show when some sort of topic tickles them. One of these people is Andy Dolph, who's been sending in content and chatting with me in the background since 2012. You may remember, for example, a few years back when Bart had a curious failure with his microphone, and Andy gave us a tutorial on how XLR cables are constructed that explained the failure. After all these years, we finally decided to sit down and have a chit-chat about his work as Special Events Coordinator for Learning Space Technologies at the University of New Hampshire. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Thank you. It's so good to finally talk with you. And since the title is a little bit of a mouthful, basically what I do is produce AV for events at the university. Sound, projection, sometimes lighting, more and more video. That it used to be pretty straightforward. You know, it was basically taking what people said and making it louder so that everybody could hear it and putting their graphics up on a screen. And it was all live in the room. And then we had a pandemic. And all of a sudden, all of our in-person events had to become remote events. And it was really challenging because the group I'm a part of had never done much virtual or streaming production. We tried it for a few years, and we would do the occasional streamed event. And what we found was we didn't do it often enough to be good at it because we were streaming to YouTube, and invariably, Google would change something in an API or something in a process in between when we tested for an event and when the event happened. And invariably, we would come within, an hour or a half hour of the start of the event and not be sure we were going to get a stream up. And so we just finally said, okay, we're not good enough at this to do it. We're going to hire that out for the 2 or 3 times a year that it's needed to somebody who does it all the time.
That makes sense.
Enter the pandemic. And all of a sudden, we have to figure out how to do all of these events, many of which are really critical to how the university does business. Introducing new students who want to come to UNH to what it's like and what we offer and all of those sorts of things that would help us to have a new class of incoming students. And there's a whole series of events we do around that, as pretty much any college probably does. And those usually start at the end of March for us and go through the middle of April.
Oh, well, that wasn't a stressful time in 2020.
Yeah, not at all. And so we very quickly had to start figuring out, well, how do we do events online? And I'm not going to sort of go through all of the evolutions of it because there were a lot of evolutions of it. I will, because I know there are people here who listen who will appreciate this, that my first attempt at adding production value to Zoom, we were fortunate that Zoom was a platform we already had. So that was where we went. But my first attempt at adding some automation to it so I could do a smoother transition from a pre-show to a show was by using AppleScript and UI scripting. And I bought this application, which I'm now not going to remember the name of, that helps you to figure out what the names of buttons are that the UI scripting could identify. I suspect it's the same thing that VoiceOver uses to identify them. And so you could like browse the UI and try to find.
Is that Keyboard Maestro?
No,
Okay.
it's I might think of it, but it's been a long time since I've looked at it. So
I actually want to back you up a little bit.
yeah.
So we've kind of jumped into the middle, and that's cool. I like starting in the middle and pulling all the threads, but I want to pull on some of them here.
Sure.
How is what you're doing any different than setting up a Zoom, sending out a link to everybody, and a professor is standing in front of a camera with a microphone and talking? What is it that you're doing that's different than just that?
When you do an event in Zoom, it's very hard to make it look smooth. Because for one thing, when you put a bunch of people on a stage together, they're using a lot of nonverbal communication. Like if there isn't an absolute hard script and it's not 100% clear when one person is going to hand over to another, for instance, they use things like eye contact to coordinate. Well,
so we aren't talking about a professor standing in front of a podium lecturing on astrophysics.
No,
We're talking about some sort of performance.
Yes and no. We're talking about events, which are like welcoming new students and presenting to them what the university has to offer. We did.
And that might be a panel, you're saying? Not
often,
just one person
often
standing?
A panel. Yeah.
Okay.
And there might be pre-recorded video components that we're going to play and various other things that need to be integrated into it. We did a significant number of town halls because everybody wanted to know what was going on. And as we were trying to navigate through the lockdowns and so forth. And so the president would host town halls on Zoom where he would have a number of the senior leadership there and they would take submitted questions. And so, this is a public facing thing. And therefore, there's reputational consequence to how it looks, right? How smooth does it go? Yeah. And particularly in a time of massive uncertainty, that if the technology doesn't work on the big ones, it's going to make people feel very uncertain about doing it themselves. And so it was also important that we set a good example and be sort of reassuring that this can be done. And in between doing events, I spent a huge amount of time working one-on-one with faculty members to optimize their setups at home for how to teach on Zoom.
Okay.
And
is that mostly from the perspective of you would get them the right microphone and the right headphones and the right interface, or is it
was actually simpler than that because a lot of that stuff wasn't even available. That it was mostly working. It was mostly working with what they had. And the thing that I talked to them about the most was how to get a good eye line to the camera so that it felt natural looking at it, and how to be lit in a way that they would look good on camera. Because a lot of people's natural tendency is, I have a beautiful view out my window. I'll put the beautiful view out my window behind me, not realizing how good our eye brain systems are at compensating for huge variations in brightness. And cameras are not that good at that. And
something as simple as turn your desk around.
Exactly.
Right? Or your kitchen table and sit on the other side of the kitchen table.
The number of people who I suggested that they turn 180 degrees and sit with the window in front of them rather than behind them. And if you've got a big window over your desk and that's in front of you and you're doing Zoom during the day, usually you're going to look great. That's usually great light.
The best lighting you can get.
Pretty much. Pretty much everything that I try to do with artificial light is to mimic a moderately overcast day outside.
Oh, nice. So it's something real flat.
Soft.
Yeah.
I don't always want flat. It depends on what I'm doing. but soft tends to be flattering to the features. And so
What is soft that's different? To me, flat is just like a uniform gray coming at me.
Right.
What is soft?
So soft, it is kind of that, but it may be directional.
Oh,
So
okay.
traditionally in television lighting, you do what they call 3-point lighting, which is to say you want a key light at usually 30 to 45 degrees off to one side of the person, and then a fill light at somewhere in that same range in the other direction. So sort of where you would put your speakers if you're setting up a stereo, but a little higher. And that's where you want the light coming from. You want more coming from the key light than from the fill light, because that helps to show the shape of the face by having a little bit of shadow, a little bit more contrast than something that's perfectly flat. And then the third light is from behind, because it highlights around the person's hair just a tiny bit, and that helps them to stand out from the background. So, yeah, Allison just turned around in the video and turned on a red light behind her. That, yeah, absolutely. That's it. I am not hearing you.
I'd muted when I rolled my chair back to turn on the light. I'm sitting here with my key light at 45 degrees and up above. I don't really have a good fill light over to the left, but I had forgotten to turn on my backlight for him.
You're getting enough reflection of the ambient light in the room that you don't need a dedicated fill light in that situation.
I do. I have lights over here. I have lights there. I have lights there, and I have a window open. So I've got a lot of light up in front of me.
The combination of everything gives you good light.
Okay. Why is this important in a professor working from home during a pandemic?
Because
obviously the silhouette's a problem, but once they've got enough light to see who they are, why is that important?
So I think there's two reasons. One is a lot of people were incredibly self-conscious about how they look on camera. And if they feel like they look natural, it's less distracting to them when they're teaching.
Okay.
But I think the other thing is that a significant amount of communication is nonverbal. And so, yes, the spoken word is definitely the most important part of the teaching, but being able to really see someone's face clearly and in a way that's not distracting is going to make the communication more effective.
Okay. Now, what about audio? When you send somebody, you've sent everybody home. Now the professor's sitting there at home and they've got a pair of earpods or AirPods, depending on the decade you're in. And those sound like poo-poo. So what do you do?
It all depends on how involved somebody wants to get. That headsets often are a pretty reasonable choice. Honestly, AirPods aren't terrible for Zoom, for spoken word. They're good enough to not be distracting. My preference is a USB mic that is placed, relatively close, typically 4 to 6 inches from the person's mouth. Both of us are using Heil PR40s because I can see yours in the video. And those are mics that have to go through an audio interface to get into USB. And that's fine if you want to go that way. But honestly, if I was going to buy something today, I probably would buy either the Earthworks podcasting mic, which is a condenser mic, but it's voiced like a dynamic. And Earthworks sent one to somebody we both know fairly well, Dave Hamilton, and said, "Hey, will you try it?" And he was like, I really think podcasters are, yeah, exactly. I think dynamic mics are the right thing for podcasting. And they were like, "Hey, would you just try it once and let
Mhm.
us know what you think. And 4 years later, he's still trying it. He hasn't taken it off of his boom, and it sounds fabulous. So that's probably, if I was going to buy something today, where I would go.
But I'm gonna back you up
Yeah.
again. Um, it wasn't until fairly recently that I could keep in my head remembering which one was dynamic and which one was
Yes.
condenser,
Yes.
and I would guess that 95% of the people listening have no idea what those 2 words mean. So if you can give
Yep.
a
So
completely low-level explanation.
yes. So let me give a bottom line answer to that, and then I'll give a slightly more technical answer. Um, so the bottom line answer is, in general, and there are some big exceptions to this, condenser mics are much more sensitive than dynamic mics, which means that they will get more detailed sound. Most of, like all of the vocals basically on records or TV or um, so forth are recorded with condenser mics because they're mostly being done in controlled studio environments and they want the
Right,
most detail they can get.
you've got sound absorption and everything, so the only
Yep.
sound is coming from the singer.
Absolutely. And if I was in a perfectly acoustically treated space that was isolated, I would absolutely use a condenser mic.
Okay.
And
But now
the
you've got, Professor Sally with her
Yep.
her back to the window, and she's in her kitchen with
Yep.
tile floor,
Yep.
and she's homeschooling her children that are in the background,
Right.
right?
And really anything that you can get close to the person's mouth is going to be such a substantial improvement, right? If
Mhm.
somebody could get a tin can that had a USB connection and get it 3 inches from their mouth, it might still be better than the mic in the laptop. Because the key thing with sound is getting the microphone in the right place first. And that is close and a little bit to one side.
So
So that
close, but not too close, which I'm not
Right.
a fan of headset mics, but first of all, because they're real high frequency, they sound
Mhm.
really scratchy and tinny to me. But invariably, wherever the person has that mic, it's not 4 to 6 inches away. It's a
Mhm.
quarter of an inch, and they're either spitting into it or breathing into it the whole time.
So there are some good sounding headsets. Mostly I know them from the professional world. Like, if you listen to the commentators on a sports game that are in the stadium, they're talking on headsets and they sound fabulous. And those
Right,
are a
but we're
few
talking about
$100s.
Professor
But
Sally doing her
right,
astrophysics lecture in her kitchen, right?
absolutely. And um And so, yeah, in general, 4 to 6 inches and off to one side so that when you are making those plosive sounds, the P's and the B's and the T's, the ones that you're blowing air out the front of your mouth, your airstream is going past the microphone. And that's the key with headsets too. If you can get a headset mic with a flexible enough boom arm to be able to bend the microphone so the actual capsule, the part that picks up sound, is to the
Mhm.
side of your mouth rather than in front of it, you will make it
Then you'll be
infinitely
good.
better.
Okay. I
Or
don't think
if
I've ever met somebody who successfully did that in real life. They just always sound horrible
Mhm.
to me.
Or the other choice, if you can't do that, which a lot of headsets can't, is put it high so that the actual capsule of the microphone is basically aimed at the tip of your nose. Because again,
Huh,
then all the air is going to go past it,
okay, not in front, not straight at it.
not straight at it.
Okay.
Um, you can do things to absorb the sound. I use a pop filter in front of my microphone, which is basically similar material to nylon stockings stretched across a plastic hoop. The
Now
one I
you're
have
actually
has
using 2 of them.
Yeah, the one I have happens to have 2 layers.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Honestly, if I'm not doing the announcer's sound where I wanna be really close, like 2 inches away, to get more what's called proximity effect. So
Mhm.
if I get much closer and I'm going to speak quieter so I don't overload it, all of a sudden there's a lot more warmth and bass in the voice.
That sounds fabulous to me too.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but it's a little unnatural. And it's unnatural in a way that's really good if what you're trying to record is in a world of instant communication. Then then that's perfect. Or
Sure.
if you're doing something that's, a recorded introduction that you want to sound like a radio announcer. But when we're having a conversation, we really want it to be as natural as we can get. And I'll tell you, the mic I recommended to people who were like, I kind of don't care what it costs within reason. I want something great that I don't have to think about. Is actually the Rode. Shoot, I had the name of it in my head.
The Rode Podcaster?
No, it's a short shotgun that is meant to go on top of a DSLR, but also but can also be a USB mic. Let me just look it up.
While you're looking that up, the one that I've been the most enamored with still over all these years is the classic Audio-Technica ATR 2100.
Yep,
When
that's
you're
a
talking really
fabulous
inexpensive.
choice. Yep.
I mean, it lists for like $75, but you can often get it for around 50, and that's what I use on the road. And I've tried a lot of different mics, and I sure like it.
Yeah, yeah. So the mic I have is the Rode VideoMic NTG. And it's meant, as I say, to be an on-camera mic. I'm not actually using it now. It's because of how we're recording, it would be difficult to switch over.
We probably need to move on from microphones. I've gotten you distracted on this, but
let me just say something about that and why I like it. Because actually, because we're recording for a podcast, I'm using my big microphone for the best possible sound. But I have to be very conscious of staying within a couple inches in order to have a consistent sound and level.
Because you will go like this, and all of a sudden it doesn't sound so good.
Right.
I've only moved a couple inches to the other side, and
right.
You could see the effect.
So when I do Zoom calls that are just calls, I use that Rode VideoMic NTG, and I've got it, the tip of the microphone I can just barely touch over my head and a little in front of me. And it is very directional, so it basically just picks up sort of an area under it that's about, I don't know, probably about 3 feet wide. And it covers that very well, but it doesn't pick up a lot of outside noise. And it lets me move freely in my chair while I'm talking to people and still have a relatively close-mic'd, relatively crisp sound.
Okay.
And they're about $300.
Yeah. So now you've got Professor Sally. She's now facing her window. She's got a reasonable mic. And then it was impossible to buy cameras. Did you just have people use at that point, they're probably just using whatever's in their laptop if they're not got a PC with a laptop
and,
camera that you couldn't really see?
It was really fine. The big thing I would recommend to people is that they get something to put under their laptop if they're using the camera in the laptop so that the camera is at approximately eye level.
Right.
Because otherwise, when the laptop's on the table in front of you, the camera looking up your nose is not a flattering view to anyone.
Nope. I remember there was one laptop that came out, they put the camera down where the hinge was. And it was the up-the-nose camera. It was the worst possible placement.
Terrible. I could not imagine why they did that. I've seen a number of those. And so, that was sort of what we did. And that to just sort of get people going. But for these higher profile events that are announcements and big public programs and alumni programming and, things that where we might normally have a few hundred people come to campus, we needed a higher level of production than that, something that made it feel more polished than sitting in Zoom with a few of your friends. And,
Right. Okay.
and so, and to do that, we moved from Zoom meeting to Zoom webinar. And they're two different services that are available from Zoom that both use the same software on your end. The difference is created by Zoom's backend to tell it, are you connecting to a meeting or are you connecting to a webinar?
And what's the difference between a webinar and a meeting?
Absolutely. The difference, the most useful way to think about it is as a metaphor, and then I'll explain what that really means.
Okay.
So the metaphor of a Zoom meeting is a bunch of people sitting around a big conference table. Now, it might be a really big conference table with 100 chairs around it, but it's egalitarian. Pretty much everybody can have their cameras on. They can all have their mics on. They can all talk. They can all share their screens. And yes, there are ways of limiting some of that, but that's really the sort of core use case for it. Webinar is like a lecture hall. There's a small number of people who are on a virtual stage at the front of the room. And then there is a larger audience that are sitting in rows of seats, all looking at the stage and more or less not caring who else is in the audience, because the transmission is mostly from the stage to the audience.
Okay.
And so what that means is, in Zoom terms, is that there are two groups of people. There are two ways you can get into a Zoom webinar: as a normal attendee or as what Zoom calls a panelist. So normal attendees cannot turn on their mic and cannot turn on their camera. All they can do is view, listen, and use the chat. And the panelists, it's actually very much like a regular Zoom meeting. They can turn on their mics, they can turn on their cameras, they can share their screens, all of that sort of stuff for each other and all of the attendees to watch.
Okay. That makes sense. I've got you. So you're switching over to the Zoom webinar, and now what is it that you do that's fancy with
that? So the first thing I do, which is kind of, to me, feels very obvious, but it's not something that happens very often, is I ask all the panelists to join a half an hour before the scheduled start of the event. So that gives us a chance to, first of all, for me to see what their camera looks like, hear what their audio looks like. If they don't have a solid connection, we can have them reboot their router if they need to, or move closer to their router, or figure out how to hardwire their computer. These are all things that I've had to do with people in order to figure out how to get a solid connection. And by having that half hour, then it gives us time to do that. And also to do a quick rundown so that everybody's on the same page about, who's on first, what's on second,
Okay.
and how we're going to move through the program. So we would do that sort of prep. And then my goal is that about 10 minutes before the scheduled start, we're all ready. And then the panelists all turn their mics and cameras off. And I put up a title slide on the screen and with a countdown timer on it, and play some music that I stole from an elevator, which is to say licensed production music that we could legally use. And then one of the nice things about webinar is you can start in what they call practice mode. And so the audience can't log in while we're doing that practice or that setup period. So once everybody's mics and cameras are off, that countdown timer and title slide and the music is all set, then I hit the button to make it live. And that's when the audience can start actually accessing it. They've been looking at a message that says the webinar hasn't started yet until then, if they click the link early. And so that allows me to then have a very clean thing. The people come in, there's video on the screen, they see the countdown timer, they hear the music, so they know that they have sound working. And
Okay.
and they see picture. And, because remember, this was early in the pandemic. A lot of us weren't very used to doing Zoom. And so there was a lot of question of, is it going to work when I join? So this way, people immediately knew they had picture, they had sound. And then at the top of the hour, or whatever the scheduled start time is, 30 seconds before that, I've given the panelists a heads up in the chat. Okay, we're going to start in 30 seconds. And that's the cue for the first person who's going to talk to turn on their camera and mic. And then we hit the top of the hour. I fade the music out. I close the screen share. And then that's the cue for the person to start talking. And so now we've got this very smooth, very clean, professional way of getting into a show. And then usually from that point, they pretty well run themselves, because I just let Zoom switch, to put the video up of whoever the person who's talking is, and that sort of thing works quite well.
Okay.
And that because often I can't predict well enough, if it's a panel that's having a conversation, I don't know when somebody is going to throw the second half of a question to somebody else on the panel, that because it's all happening fairly spontaneously, it's not scripted. But to do what I just described in a way that actually looks smooth to the audience is a huge amount of button pushing on multiple computers in a short period of time. Because,
Really?
well, I'm playing the music and the countdown slide from another machine. Because I don't want to bog down my Zoom machine with any other tasks. Because at the time I was using machines that weren't very powerful. Just because it was what was to hand. There were old iMacs.
So is that then that other computer must be logged in as another user who is a member of this panel in some way?
So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to take and the way I actually do it is I take the HDMI out that to the Mac is the second monitor of my playback computer. I take
Say that again?
Okay. So I've got a Mac Mini with a monitor, and that monitor is what I use to control it.
Is this your primary? This
no,
is the primary or
the
secondary?
secondary machine.
Okay.
And actually, let me say this in a way that'll be clearer. There's a playback machine and a Zoom machine. That's an easier way to think about it, because that what you would call primary is the Zoom machine, because all it's doing is Zoom. And the playback machine, I use a tool called QLab, which could be a whole show in and of itself, which is a system, a piece of software for playing audio and video and doing show control for performances. And it's specifically meant to build things, and you can build very, very complex things in it and very simple things. And you can have them have specific time relationships built in. So 10 seconds after this starts, that automatically starts. Or you can have it start this and keep doing it until I hit the space bar and then do the next thing. And you can do any combination of that. So I can build a sequence the way I want it and have it not go on to the next sequence until I cue it manually. Now,
how you were starting to tell me how that video signal and audio signal gets into the Zoom?
Right. So what I do is I take the second output. So I have a USB-C monitor connected to the Mac Mini. That's my monitor I operate from. Then I take the HDMI out on the Mini and run it into a USB capture card on the Zoom machine. And then when I share screen in Zoom, I don't actually share screen. I use the camera share function. And so to Zoom, my other computer is another camera.
Okay.
Now, the real trick is how do you get audio from that machine into the Zoom? And what I do is use Loopback from Rogue Amoeba.
So Loopback is an application that allows you to route audio signals together and combine them into a single virtual source. I'm using it as we speak. It's
I am
working on
too.
something, but but for the audience, so now you've got the Mini has HDMI. Well, HDMI can carry audio and video, right? Why
And
is it
that's
only
how-
carrying video?
So it actually is carrying audio and video. Zoom just won't pay any attention to that audio.
Okay.
Unless I select that audio as my microphone, and then my microphone doesn't work.
So you're combining, you're using Loopback to create this virtual audio source, which is the audio from the HDMI coming into the Zoom Mac from the source Mac.
And there's actually a trick. And the trick is the first time you share audio with Zoom, it in the background installs a thing called Zoom Audio Device, which is a virtual sound card. And so what I do is actually route the audio from the capture card from that HDMI directly to Zoom Audio Device. And then in Zoom, I tell Zoom, share camera and share sound from my computer in big quotes, because the sound from, quote, my computer is actually the sound from Loopback, because that's how I've routed it.
I like it. It's a little Rube Goldberg-y, but that's the kind of thing, once you have it set up, it just sort of works, right?
That's correct. It took some figuring out to set it up, but it has proven extremely reliable. And you can do this all on one machine. And I have, on any M series Mac is powerful enough to do the playback on one machine. And that simplifies things immensely, because then Zoom is just screen sharing a second screen on the one machine, and it's doing it the way it already knows how to do it.
Right.
In
2020, they were the first M1 Mac was just being produced, so it was a little early for that.
Yeah, and I am, I guess the word would be paranoid about new technology until it's proven for using it in shows. For myself, I'm absolutely happy to be on the bleeding edge a lot of the time, but when it's a show machine, I need to know I can count on it, because it needs to not fail. And so I'm just now starting to put Sequoia on my show machines.
Oh, wow.
I stay a year behind.
Yeah. Oh, based on the bugs I've run into in the last 24 hours with Tahoe, I'd stick around with that Sequoia for a little bit. I'd hang loose.
And really, I use QLab a lot. And so I tend to follow the recommendations of the folks at Figure 53 who make it. And when they say they're comfortable, then I know I'm probably pretty safe, because they're usually pickier than I am. Because they have people who are really torture testing these machines, doing Broadway shows and theme parks and all sorts of very complicated multi-output, things that would take a long time to explain. And I do some of that too, but most of the time, the way I use it is pretty simple.
So QLab is $1,400.
It's
okay.
So here's the thing. You don't have to. So there's a few things. The first one is there's a free version, and the free version is not a demo. And a lot of small community theaters or church groups or dance companies, the free version of QLab will do everything they ever need it to do. And
Okay, yeah, they've got a nice table that shows what it can do for
Yep.
free and what you pay for.
And the other thing is, you don't have to buy, there's 3 separate licenses, one for audio, one for video, and one for lighting. And so depending on what feature sets you need, you can buy just the advanced features in the area you need, and that reduces the cost significantly.
I got you. Okay, yeah, if I only check audio, it's $600.
Right.
Video by itself is $600. Let me guess what lighting is.
Yep.
$600.
Yep.
But if you add them all, the 3 together, it's $1,400.
Right.
So you're saving money right there.
You are, if you need it. But I very
Mhm.
rarely use QLab for lighting. So most of the licenses, we have a number of licenses because we have a lot of machines we run it on. Most of our licenses are pro audio, pro video, and not lighting because I just don't need it. So why pay for it?
Sure. This is an interesting business model because they also have rentals by the day.
Yes.
And that's a great idea for something that you're using for a performance. It's like, I need
Exactly.
it Tuesday through Saturday, but I don't need it the rest of the month.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
It's really, and I believe that whatever you pay in rental kind of goes into your QLab bank account, and you can apply that towards a purchase down the road.
So if you end up getting hooked on it and using it a lot, you can rent with a license to buy. Huh?
sort of rent to own. And I will also mention, by the way, that QLab has a very active Google group, users Google group, with a bunch of really, really smart people, including
There are still Google groups?
Oh yeah. It's basically an email list.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was going to say,
it's-
I thought Google Groups was gone.
No, I know what you're thinking of. The thing with the circles. That was their social
Wasn't that called
network.
Google Groups?
No, I don't think so. I'm sure people are yelling at their phones right now. But yeah, no, this is the Google Groups is their Google's email list service. And so
Okay.
there's a very active Google group for QLab where there are people who do really incredibly sophisticated things with it, often using a lot of AppleScript because it integrates AppleScript very thoroughly. And I don't program AppleScript at all. I don't do a lot of programming, but sometimes I run across a problem and I post about it on the list, hey, I'm trying to do this weird thing. And sometimes one of those folks will reply with, here's 4 lines of AppleScript that will make the thing happen that you're trying to do. And you can just set it up to run as many times as you need to make the 1,800 queues you need to make or whatever.
Okay.
It's pretty cool.
We did say we were going to run the risk of going in too deep, and I think we've gotten deeper than I'm comfortable with.
That's
I'm
fine.
Following along.
That's fine.
So, is there any more you wanted to tell us about smoothly setting up these shows?
I wanted to add one piece, which is a tool which now came from Zoom, but was developed during the pandemic by this guy Andy Carluccio, called Zoom OSC, and it now, as I say, is a part of Zoom. They bought his company, I think technically they didn't buy the company. They bought assets and he went to work for, I don't know exactly what the sort of contracting side of it is, but the thing that's cool is it's a special version of Zoom. When you open it, it looks just like normal Zoom. You log in like normal, you join a meeting like normal, but it speaks OSC, which is a protocol that is meant for devices mostly in the entertainment world to use to control each other. So QLab speaks OSC. So now I can use OSC commands in QLab to effectively push buttons in Zoom for me at specific times in my sequence of events.
100% lost.
Okay.
What is OSC?
OSC is a protocol. It's a protocol that operates over Ethernet. That's basically just a way for one device or piece of software to send a message over the network to another device or piece of software. It's primarily used for things like remote controlling audio and video equipment. So if I want to be able to move a fader on my iPad and have the same level change on a console, I can do that using OSC. So I'll give you the most classic example of it is for what we call show control, which is getting the light board, the soundboard, and the video system to all talk to each other. So let's say we're doing a creepy, murder mystery play. So it's a dark and stormy night. Well, I want the thunder and lightning to happen in a specific relationship to each other in the theater. And so the sound system, in this case, QLab, is going to play the thunder sound. But I want the lightning to happen, let's say, 3/4 of a second before the thunder happens. And typically in theater, that's controlled by a whole separate device, that there's a separate lighting control board. So what I can do is have one cue in QLab that says to the light board, go Q27 go. And then 3/4 of a second later, QLab plays the sound.
Okay.
So this is all about devices talking to each other. And so just like QLab can tell the light board to run a specific cue, it can tell Zoom OSC to unmute someone's microphone, or to share the screen, or to stop sharing the screen. Or it can put a message in the chat, an automated message in the chat. All of these things. And so what that does is allow me to, in more complex events like virtual graduations, which often have multiple pre-recorded components and so forth, I can set it up so that 30 seconds before that video ends, it puts a message in the chat that goes just to the panelists that says, we're back in 30 seconds. And then it can automatically prompt the person who's speaking next to turn on their mic and camera. And then right when the video ends, it automatically spotlights that person for me in Zoom. Because
I know you're about to do it to them.
Right. Because we've built this, we've walked through a run of show document and we've built this as a team. But what it does is, rather than the video ends and then I'm fumbling with my mouse to spotlight the right person, it just happens instantly with precision down to the hundredths of a second if I want.
So you storyboard this ahead of time?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Are the buttons you're pushing to cause something like that to happen, are you using something like a Stream Deck?
So I have a Stream Deck. Mostly I only use one button on it during the show. So I can, for things that are more freeform, I use buttons on the Stream Deck to spotlight people and that kind of stuff. But for something that's more scripted, like a virtual graduation where we're all following a very regimented program, which the most complicated ones tend to be that style, I've pre-programmed all of it in QLab. And so what
happens if a graduation speaker runs long and that's all storyboarded out?
So that's where it's important that I can decide whether it's locked to time or not. So I can build a sequence that happens based on timing. And then it stops. And it's just going to sit there until I hit go. And it would sit there forever.
How are you hitting go?
On my Stream Deck.
You are. Okay.
Yeah,
oh,
that's the one button.
Hey, I walked you right into what you wanted to say there.
That's the one button on the Stream Deck.
Okay.
And
that's wild.
And so I've created a template that I use in QLab that every time I set up a new webinar, I pull up this template and it's got all of my basic framework for how I get into the show and to put the pre-show graphic up, and I just put the right file in it. And it's got my countdown timer, which is a little video that it plays, a transparent background video that it plays over the top, and it's got the music. And so it's all there. and I just put in the particulars of that event, and it lets me as one person run something very complex that if we were running it all live would take several people, at least 2, sometimes 3 people, if we were trying to run it manually, and we couldn't do it as smoothly as I can do it alone using the automation.
That's amazing. I looked it up. OSC stands for Open Sound Control.
Mm-hmm. It does, and I didn't say it for a reason, and the reason is that often that's not what it's used for. So I think it's a little bit of a misnomer.
This is just the definition of OSC stands for Open Sound Control, is a protocol for networking sound synthesizers, computers, other multimedia devices, just as you just described.
But we also use it for lighting. We also use it for controlling video systems. It does lots of things that aren't sound.
It says multimedia.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. The word sound is a misnomer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
it's going beyond that.
For people who know what MIDI is, if you don't, just ignore the next 10 seconds. But for people who know what MIDI is, OSC was designed as a more modern replacement for MIDI, although it mostly has not been adopted that way. The people who use MIDI with synthesizers where it was originally developed mostly still use MIDI. Even though it's from the 70s, 80s. It's very, very simple technology, but very, very reliable. So if it works, if it works, fix it until it doesn't.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to have to cut us off here.
Sure.
This was really fun. I know we've just touched the surface of the kind of things you do, but it was super fun for me. Do you have a social media preference?
I really don't. I am relatively antisocial.
Okay. We talked about that ahead of time. Well, I tell you what, if anybody wants to chat with Andy, you can communicate through me,
Sure.
Allison@podfeed.com. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Andy. This was fantastic. I know we went down a bunch of rabbit holes, but I enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, and I knew we would. It's one of the things I like about these sort of long-form conversations is it gives us room to explore, which as a listener is something I've really enjoyed for years and years and years now, listening to the NosillaCast.
Very good. Well, I can't think of a better place to stop us. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Chit Chat Across the Pond. Did you notice there weren't any ads in the show? That's because this show is not ad-supported. It's supported by you. If you learned something or maybe you were just entertained, consider contributing to the Podfeed podcast. You can do that by going over to podfeed.com and look for the big red button that says Support the Show. When you click that button, you're going to find different ways to contribute. You can donate one time through the big Donate button with a credit card or Apple Pay, or you can use PayPal. If you want to make a recurring contribution, click the Patreon button. Keep in mind, I don't charge Patreon for Chit Chat Across the Pond or Programming by Stealth episodes, just once a month for the NosillaCast. That keeps it simple. If you want to contact me for any reason, you can email me at allison@podfeed.com, and you can follow me on Mastodon at podfeed.com/Mastodon. Maybe you want to talk to other NosillaCastaways? You can do that in our Slack group at podfeed.com/Slack. Thanks for listening, and stay subscribed.